Now we're going to find parallel and perpendicular slopes. All right. Now, this is assuming that we've already calculated the slope. We found the slope, and you want to know, hey, what would a parallel slope be, or what would a perpendicular slope be? Now, for perpendicular slopes, they're actually the tricky ones. There's a word here I'm using, negative reciprocals. So if you want to find a perpendicular slope, you have to do the negative reciprocal to that number. And I'll demonstrate that in a minute. For a parallel slope, I hope it would be intuitively obvious that it's the same. If you have two lines and they're parallel to each other, they would have the same slant. So parallel slopes, I hope, are just a piece of cake. You know, you just be like, oh, the slope's 3, so the slope's 3. Because if they have the same slant, they would have the same slope. Parallel lines have to have the same slant. Okay, so I've written a number of slopes up here. We're just going to assume that you've already calculated these slopes. And now you need the parallel slope and the perpendicular slope. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the parallel ones here and the perpendicular ones here. Those are the geometry signs for parallel and perpendicular. All right, parallel. Well, you just said they were the same. Yep, it's 2/3. Nothing's changed. All right, perpendicular, negative reciprocal. Now think back, what does the word reciprocal mean? Reciprocal is the fancy way to say you take a fraction and you flip it over. Negative reciprocal means you put a negative sign in front of it after you flip it over. So here I have 2/3. So I'm going to flip it over. It's going to become 3/2. And I'm going to put a negative sign in front of it. So the perpendicular slope is negative 3/2. That's a whole number. Okay, Mr. Trapp, parallel, it's the same. I got that. But how do I flip a whole number? All whole numbers can be written over 1 as a fraction. So when I flip 3 over 1, I get 1/3. Negative reciprocal, I put a negative sign in front of it. Negative 4/7. All right, we're going along. Negative 4/7. Parallel, it's the same. Flip it. So negative 4/7 flipped is negative 7 over 4. And I put a negative sign in front of it. Now when you get two negatives is a positive. Now I've got the blackboard or the whiteboard here, so I can just erase it easily. You probably won't bother writing that. Hopefully you realize that, hey, if it's positive, when I do it, it's going to become negative. This was positive, it became negative. When it's negative, it ends up becoming positive. The negative reciprocal means it just changes sign. All right, negative 7. So the slope is, for parallel, negative 7. For perpendicular, I'm going to put the 1 under it. So I've got negative 7 over 1. And I'm going to write 1 over 7. Since it's negative, I'm going to make it positive. 1/5 will become 5. And when I'm thinking ahead. It'll be 1/5 for parallel, and when I flip it over, it will become negative 5. So I forgot the order that I was doing them in. Last one is negative 1. That's a really simple one, but it's almost so simple it's difficult. Negative 1 over 1 will still be negative 1. It'll stay the same, but you flip it and change the sign. It's going to actually end up making it positive 1. So when the slope is negative 1 or the slope is positive 1, it actually ends up looking pretty similar. You just end up changing the sign. Okay, for the last little bit, we've got two different points up here. If you need to find the parallel and perpendicular slope, you'd have to do a little calculating first. So I've got my m equals, and I'm going to go ahead and plug it in. 12 minus 6 for y2 minus y1, and 8 minus 5 for the x2 minus the x1. That gives me 6 over 3, which is 2. So for the parallel slope is the same, it's 2. For the perpendicular slope, well, this is going to be 2 over 1. So we're going to flip it. It's going to become 1/2, and we change the sign, and that makes it negative. Anyway, when you're finding parallel and perpendicular slopes, make sure that when you're doing perpendicular, you're doing the negative reciprocal, and when you're doing parallel, you just have to realize that it's exactly the same. Good luck.